My sister tried to ruin my life because I was the other one, but I got the last laugh. Here's how I finally broke free, and I always knew I was the other one. Even as a child, it was clear to everyone, and especially to me, that I could never live up to my sister. My name is Laura, and I'm 29 years old now, but the feeling of being overshadowed started long before I even knew what that word meant. Growing up in suburban Philadelphia, I was the quiet one, the girl who loved to draw and dream, while my older sister Cassandra, now 35, was the golden child. Cassandra shined in every way imaginable. She was the star of every school play, the captain of the soccer team, and the one who brought home endless trophies and certificates. Meanwhile, I was the girl sketching in her notebook, content in my little world, at least until I realized how little it mattered to anyone else. It wasn't as if I didn't try. I poured everything I had into my art because it was the only thing that made me feel like I was good at something. I remember one middle school parent-teacher conference where my art teacher told my mom, "Laura has real talent. If she keeps at it, she could earn a scholarship for college." I was over the moon, so proud of myself. But when we got home, my mom just shrugged and said, "That's nice, honey, but art isn't really a career. Cassandra's already preparing for her SATs. Maybe you should think about something more practical." I was 12 years old, and I remember standing there, holding my sketchbook, feeling like I'd been told my dreams didn't matter. I didn't want to be practical. I wanted them to be proud of me for something, anything. But the favoritism didn't stop there. My parents gave Cassandra every possible advantage. She had piano lessons, private tutors, and fancy summer camps, even though she didn't seem to like any of it. When I asked for painting classes, even the cheap ones at the community center, the answer was always the same. "We just can't afford it right now, Laura." Yet, when Cassandra turned 16, they magically found the money to buy her a car, a brand new, shiny red sedan. I didn't say anything, though I was already starting to understand how things worked in our family. But deep down, I told myself that maybe, just maybe, they'd surprise me when my 16th birthday came around. When the day finally arrived, I tried to keep my hopes in check. I wasn't expecting a brand new car, but maybe something. A little surprise to show they were thinking of me. Instead, I got a sweater. A sweater. I wasn't ungrateful. I knew not every kid got a car. But the worst part wasn't the gift itself. The worst part was what happened that evening. Cassandra, who was home from college for the weekend, came back that night with a flat tire. And guess who got to watch my dad spend hours in the driveway, fixing it while my birthday cake sat untouched on the counter? Happy birthday to me. It wasn't just the material things that stung. It was the constant stream of praise Cassandra received while I faded into the background. My mom was always telling her, "You're so beautiful, so smart, you're going to do amazing things." I can't remember the last time she said anything like that to me. When I got my first job at a small graphic design agency, I was thrilled. I couldn't wait to tell my parents. I thought maybe, finally, they'd be proud of me. But when I told my mom, her response was, "That's nice, but when are you going back to school? You know Cassandra has her master's degree now." I tried to talk to my dad about it once. He's quieter than my mom, more laid back. I asked him why it felt like they cared more about Cassandra than me. He sighed, looked uncomfortable, and finally said, "We don't love her more, Laura. She just needs us more." What was that even supposed to mean? Cassandra had everything handed to her on a silver platter. If anyone needed help, it was me. As the years went on, the gap between us only grew wider. Cassandra went on to graduate from an Ivy League school, land a high-paying job in corporate law, and marry Jason, her equally impressive husband. Meanwhile, I was stuck in a job I liked but didn't love, struggling to make ends meet as a freelance graphic designer. One of the lowest points came during Thanksgiving a few years ago. Cassandra and Jason came over to my parents' house, and my mom went all out. Prime rib, expensive wine, the whole 9 yards. I brought a pumpkin pie I'd made myself, a big deal for me since I'm not much of a cook. When I put it on the table, my mom gave me this tight little smile and said, "Oh, sweetie, that's nice." But Cassandra brought a cheesecake from that bakery downtown. Everyone loves their desserts. Guess which one everyone ate first? Cassandra didn't even seem to notice the favoritism. Or maybe she did, but she pretended not to. Years ago, I tried to talk to her about it. I told her it wasn't fair how mom and dad treated us so differently. She just looked at me with this wide-eyed, innocent expression and said, "Laura, you're being ridiculous. Mom and Dad love us equally." Then she posted a picture on Instagram with the caption, "My parents are the best," over a shot of the new watch they just bought her, just because it felt like I was being gaslit. Every time I tried to express how I felt, I was met with either denial or patronizing sympathy. "You're overreacting, Laura," or "Oh, you poor thing." Eventually, I stopped trying. I stopped going to family gatherings, stopped calling my mom, except to hear the latest updates about Cassandra's accomplishments. I tried to focus on my art again, the one thing that had ever made me feel whole. But it was hard. No matter how much distance I put between myself and my family, there was always that voice in the back of my head whispering, "You'll never be good enough." I guess that's why meeting Ethan changed everything for me. For the first time, someone saw me for who I really was. Not Cassandra's little sister, not the forgotten daughter. Just me. But of course, Cassandra found a way to ruin that too. When I met Ethan, I wasn't expecting anything to change. By that point in my life, I'd learned to keep my expectations low, especially when it came to people noticing me. But Ethan was different. He saw me in a way no one ever had, and for the first time, I started to believe that maybe I was worth something, even if my family never thought so. It happened by chance, at a small business expo in Austin. I was there trying to network for my graphic design work, which was laughable because I'm terrible at networking. I was standing near a booth, flipping through brochures I didn't care about, when I heard a voice behind me. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else." I turned and saw him. Tall, with dark brown hair just starting to turn silver at the edges, and this easy, confident smile that somehow wasn't smug. I gave a small, nervous laugh, instantly embarrassed. "Is it that obvious?" I asked. "Pretty much," he replied, handing me a business card. "Ethan Marks. I run a small tech company. What about you?" For the first time, someone seemed genuinely curious about what I did. I told him I was a freelance graphic designer, and instead of glazing over or dismissing it, he started asking questions. Real questions, like what kind of clients I worked with, what my process was, and what projects I was most proud of. It felt refreshing, like he wasn't just making small talk, but actually cared. By the time the event ended, we'd been talking for nearly an hour. He asked for my card, saying he might need help rebranding his company. I wasn't sure if he was serious, but I gave it to him anyway, thinking I'd never hear from him again. But I did. A week later, Ethan called and asked if I'd be interested in working on some branding materials for his company. I said yes, partly because I needed the work and partly because I couldn't stop thinking about him. As we worked together, I saw more of what made him so magnetic. He was smart and driven, but without the arrogance I'd come to expect from people in his position. He treated me as an equal, not just some struggling freelancer he was doing a favor for. Our professional relationship turned personal after a few weeks. Ethan asked me out for coffee, and I said yes. Then came dinner. Then another dinner. Before I knew it, we were dating, and for the first time in my life, I felt like someone saw me, really saw me. Not as Cassandra's little sister or the daughter who could never measure up, but as Laura. Ethan didn't just love me, he respected me. He believed in me in a way no one else ever had, and slowly, I started to believe in myself too. Of course, when I introduced him to my family, things didn't go as smoothly. At first, my parents seemed cautiously supportive. They loved that Ethan was successful, but my mom couldn't resist slipping in snide comments. "He's a bit older, isn't he?" she asked one night at dinner. "I hope he's serious about you." Then there was Cassandra. From the moment she met Ethan, she despised him. I should have seen it coming. Cassandra thrives on being the center of attention, the one everyone envies. Ethan's accomplishments and confidence threatened her in a way I hadn't expected. It started small, with her making offhand comments at family dinners. "So, Laura," she said one night, swirling her wine glass like she was in some bad soap opera, "did you land the client and the guy? That's quite the deal." Her smirk made it clear what she was implying, that I was only with Ethan for his money. I brushed it off, but it didn't stop there. Cassandra began spreading rumors to our extended family. She told my parents that I was rushing into things, and that Ethan was some kind of sugar daddy helping me escape my floundering career. "I just think Laura's moving too fast," she said to my mom one evening. "It's not like she's ever dated anyone like Ethan before. You have to admit, it's a big step up for her." The worst part? My parents believed her. One night, my mom sat me down after dinner, her voice full of fake concern. "Laura," she said, "are you sure Ethan's the right man for you? He's so established, and I just don't want you to get hurt if things don't work out." "What are you talking about, Mom?" I asked, already feeling my stomach twist. "Cassandra mentioned some things." Of course she did, because Cassandra couldn't stand it if I had something she didn't. I stormed out that night, but the damage had already been done. My parents looked at me differently after that, like I was some foolish little girl who didn't know what she was doing. And Cassandra? She kept fanning the flames, whispering to anyone who would listen about how I was using Ethan. It didn't stop at family gatherings. Cassandra started posting passive-aggressive comments on social media, making sure they were just vague enough to avoid direct confrontation. She'd upload pictures of herself and Jason, smiling in front of their giant house, with captions like, "It's amazing what you can achieve with hard work and independence. Some of us don't need shortcuts." I tried to ignore her, but it was impossible. Mutual friends started calling me, asking if the rumors were true. "Hey, Laura," one of them said nervously over the phone. "I just wanted to check in. I heard some things about Ethan. Is everything okay?" "What things?" I asked, already knowing where this was going. "Well, Cassandra said he might be controlling, that you've been spending all your time with him and barely talking to your family anymore." I wanted to scream. Instead, I calmly explained that none of it was true, but the damage was already done. Cassandra's lies had planted seeds of doubt, not just in my family, but in people I hadn't spoken to in years. When I confronted her about it, she played the victim as always. "I was just worried about you," she said, wide-eyed and innocent. "I didn't mean for it to get blown out of proportion. You know how people love to gossip. Gossip you started." I snapped. "Why can't you just be happy for me for once?" She shrugged, smirking. "Maybe you're just too sensitive, Laura." That night, Ethan held me while I cried. "You don't owe anyone an explanation for our relationship," he said softly. "Not your parents, not Cassandra, not anyone. The people who care about you will see the truth." I wanted to believe him, but it was hard. Cassandra's lies were isolating me, and even though Ethan's support kept me grounded, I couldn't help but feel like I was fighting a losing battle. But Ethan was right about one thing. The people who truly cared stood by me. My best friend, Claire, called me the next day after hearing the rumors. "This is ridiculous, Laura," she said. "Anyone who knows you knows you're not like that. Cassandra's just jealous. She can't stand that you're happy." Her words meant more to me than I could say. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel so alone. Still, the war Cassandra had started wasn't over. She wasn't done trying to tear me down, and the worst was yet to come. I thought things couldn't get worse after Cassandra started spreading lies to our family and friends. I was wrong. She wasn't just satisfied with sowing doubt within our circle. She wanted to destroy everything good in my life. It began with the social media posts. Subtle at first, but unmistakable. A picture of her standing in front of her massive home with Jason, captioned, "Hard work pays off. Some of us don't need handouts." Another, holding an expensive handbag, read, "Bought this with my own money because, some of us don't rely on others for their lifestyle." I knew it was about me. The timing couldn't have been a coincidence. A week before, Ethan and I had posted pictures from a weekend trip to Napa Valley, a short getaway he planned to celebrate my latest project milestone. Cassandra must have seen them because her posts became more pointed. The worst one was a selfie of her sitting in her car, holding a coffee mug that said "Girl Boss," with the caption, "It's amazing what people will do for a free ride in life." I wanted to scream. I wanted to post something in response, to call her out for the toxic, jealous person she was. But Ethan stopped me. "She's baiting you," he said, as calm and rational as always. "If you respond, you're giving her exactly what she wants. Let her dig her own hole. People will see her for who she is." I knew he was right, but it didn't make it any easier. Every time I opened my social media, there she was, smug and passive-aggressive, backed by an army of enablers. Some of her friends even tagged me in the comments, laughing and making thinly veiled jabs. I stopped scrolling entirely, but the damage was already done. Things escalated when my parents invited Ethan and me over for dinner. They called it a relaxing family evening, but I should have known better. Nothing about being in the same room as Cassandra was ever relaxing. When we walked in, she greeted us with her usual fake smile. "Oh, Laura, I didn't know you'd be here," she said sweetly, her voice dripping with insincerity. Her tone immediately set me on edge, but I tried to ignore her. Ethan and I sat down, and for a while, it was mostly small talk. My dad asked Ethan about his work, and my mom told a long-winded story about some neighbor's cat. It was almost normal, but Cassandra couldn't stand being left out of the spotlight for long. She leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine glass like some kind of villain in a movie, and said, "You know, it's funny. I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and she mentioned how lucky some people are to find generous partners. It must be nice to have someone take care of everything for you." The table went silent. My dad coughed awkwardly, and my mom shot Cassandra a warning glance, but she ignored it. "I mean," she continued, staring right at me, "imagine finding someone who's willing to pay for your vacations, your lifestyle, even your career. Must be nice, right?" I felt the blood rush to my face. Ethan stiffened beside me, his jaw tightening, but I could feel him silently telling me to stay calm. "Are you trying to say something, Cassandra?" I asked, keeping my voice as even as I could. "Oh no, of course not," she said, all fake innocence. "I'm just making an observation. Some people have all the luck." "Luck has nothing to do with it," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. "Laura works hard, and she doesn't need to rely on anyone to support her." "Of course she does," Cassandra said with a laugh. "I mean, graphic design is such a stable and lucrative career. I'm sure you never help her out, right?" "Enough," my mom snapped, her voice sharp for the first time in years. "Cassandra, that's not appropriate." But Cassandra wasn't done. She slammed her glass down a little too hard, the sound echoing through the room. "I'm just being honest, Mom. Isn't that what we're supposed to do as a family? Be honest with each other?" I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up so fast my chair nearly toppled over. "Honesty?" I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You wouldn't know honesty if it hit you in the face. All you know how to do is tear people down because you can't stand not being the center of attention." "Laura, don't," Ethan murmured, placing a hand on my arm, but I was beyond caring. "You know what your problem is, Cassandra?" I said, pointing a trembling finger at her. "You can't handle the fact that someone else might actually be happy for once. You thrive on making other people feel small because that's the only way you can feel big." Her face turned red, but she didn't respond. My dad started saying something about how we all needed to calm down, but I wasn't listening. I grabbed my coat and turned to Ethan. "Let's go," I said. We left without another word, the tension in the room so thick it felt suffocating. As soon as we got to the car, I burst into tears. "I can't do this anymore," I sobbed. "I can't keep pretending everything's fine when she's destroying my life." "You don't have to," Ethan said, pulling me into his arms. "You don't owe her, or anyone else, anything. You've worked hard for what you have, and you don't need to justify it to anyone, least of all Cassandra." I wanted to believe him, but it felt like Cassandra's shadow was always looming over me. Everywhere I turned, her lies followed. And no matter how hard I tried to escape, she always found a way to drag me back down. But Ethan was right about one thing. I didn't owe her anything. If I was going to move forward, I needed to start putting myself first, even if that meant walking away from my family entirely. After that disastrous family dinner, I knew I couldn't keep putting myself in Cassandra's line of fire. Every interaction with her felt like walking into a trap, one designed to make me feel small and powerless. I had to make a choice. Protect my sanity, or keep pretending everything was fine for the sake of family unity. I chose my sanity. The first test came a few weeks later when my parents called to invite Ethan and me to a barbecue at their house. "It'll be fun," my mom said, her voice overly cheerful. "Cassandra and Jason will be there, and we haven't seen you and Ethan in ages." I hesitated. I'd spent years caving to her invitations out of guilt, but this time, I couldn't do it. "I don't think that's a good idea, Mom," I said firmly. She sighed, and I could practically hear the eye roll in her voice. "Oh, Laura, don't be like this. It's just a little barbecue. You're not still upset about what Cassandra said, are you?" My stomach clenched at her dismissal. "Upset?" I repeated. "Mom, she accused me of being a gold digger in front of the whole family. And that's not even counting the things she's been saying online. Oh, honey, Mom said, brushing it off like it was nothing. You know how Cassandra is. She doesn't mean half of what she says. You two just need to talk things out. No, Mom, I replied, my voice steady but cold. What I need is for her to stop attacking me every chance she gets. Until that happens, I'm not going to any event where she's present. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Mom said, well, I think you're overreacting, but if that's how you feel. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it didn't matter. I'd made my decision. That weekend, instead of sitting through another tense family gathering, Ethan and I went hiking in the mountains. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt free. No Cassandra, no judgment, just peace. Of course, my absence didn't go unnoticed. A few days later, my dad called. Laura, he said, his tone calm but laced with disappointment. Your mom told me you didn't come to the barbecue because of Cassandra. Is that true? Yes, Dad, I said, bracing myself for the guilt trip I knew was coming. He sighed heavily. Laura, she's your sister. Families fight sometimes, but that doesn't mean you just walk away. Your mom and I raised you both better than that. My throat tightened. Dad, this isn't just a fight. This is years of Cassandra tearing me down, and I'm not going to put up with it anymore. I have to protect myself. I get that you're upset, he said, though he clearly didn't. But don't let this destroy the family. You two need to find a way to work things out. Destroy the family? I repeated, my voice trembling with anger. Dad, I'm not the one destroying the family. Cassandra is. And if you want to blame someone, blame her. He didn't respond. He never would. Over the next 2 months, I stuck to my decision. I declined every invitation from my parents if Cassandra would be there. Let us know when you're hosting something without Cassandra, I told them. They never did. Instead, every time I turned them down, they acted like I was the unreasonable one. You're being so harsh, Laura, Mom said during one of her many guilt-laden phone calls. Cassandra's trying her best, and you're letting a minor misunderstanding ruin everything? What she refused to understand, or maybe just didn't want to admit, was that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern, one that had been going on for years, and I was done letting it consume me. With the distance I'd created from my family, I started to focus on myself again. I took on new clients, poured my energy into my portfolio, and began rebuilding the confidence Cassandra had spent years chipping away at. Ethan was my biggest supporter through it all. Whenever I doubted myself, he was there to remind me of everything I'd accomplished and everything I was capable of. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. Not the shadow of Cassandra, not the forgotten daughter, but Laura. But Cassandra wasn't done with her games. One afternoon, my best friend Claire called me, her tone filled with alarm. Have you seen Cassandra's latest post? She asked. No, I said, already feeling my stomach drop. What did she do now? Claire hesitated. She posted a picture from your parents' anniversary dinner and captioned it. Some of us actually show up for our family. My chest tightened. Of course she'd twist things to make me look like the bad guy. She can't stand that I'm not playing her game anymore, I said, pacing my apartment. So now she's trying to make me look like the problem. I know it's hard, Claire said gently, but don't let her get to you. You're doing the right thing by setting boundaries. I wanted to believe her, but it wasn't that simple. Every time I saw a picture of my family without me or heard the disappointment in my mom's voice, I felt a pang of guilt. No matter how much I told myself I was doing the right thing, part of me still craved their approval. The breaking point came when my parents invited Ethan and me to dinner, promising it would just be the four of us. No Cassandra? I asked, my voice cautious. No Cassandra, Mom said. Just us. I reluctantly agreed, hoping this would be a chance for us to have an honest conversation without Cassandra's interference. But when we arrived, there was a fifth-place setting at the table. Please tell me that's not for who I think it is, I said, my voice shaking. Before my mom could answer, the doorbell rang. Moments later, Cassandra strolled in, smiling as if nothing had happened. Oh, Laura, she said, feigning surprise. I didn't know you'd be here. I turned to my parents, my hands trembling with anger. Are you serious? You lied to me. Laura, please, Mom said, her voice pleading. We just thought if you two spent some time together, you could work things out. I shook my head, tears of frustration welling up in my eyes. You don't get it, do you? I'm not the problem here. She is. Cassandra gasped, clutching her chest in mock indignation. Me? What did I do? You know exactly what you did, I said, my voice rising. You've spent our entire lives tearing me down, and I'm done pretending it's okay. I'm done being your punching bag. She smirked, completely unfazed. Maybe if you stopped playing the victim all the time, people would actually take you seriously. That was it. I turned to Ethan and grabbed his hand. If you can't respect my boundaries, I said to my parents, my voice trembling, then I can't be part of this family anymore. My mom started to cry, and my dad looked like he wanted to say something, but I didn't wait to hear it. I walked out the door, leaving Cassandra and her smug smile behind. Walking out of my parents' house that night was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I didn't want to sever ties with them, but I knew I had to. If they couldn't respect the boundaries I'd set, there was no way forward. As much as I wanted to be part of a family, I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for people who refused to see the damage Cassandra had done. In the days that followed, I felt a mix of emotions: sadness, relief, anger, and even guilt. But through it all, Ethan was there. You don't have to feel guilty for protecting yourself, he told me one night as we sat on the couch. You've spent your whole life trying to earn their approval. It's okay to let that go. He was right, of course. I had spent years chasing something I was never going to get. For the first time, I allowed myself to let go of the need to prove myself to my family. Instead, I focused on building a life that made me happy. Ethan and I poured ourselves into our careers. My graphic design business was finally taking off in ways I never expected. A campaign I designed for a small eco-friendly fashion brand ended up going viral, earning me recognition in the design world. Winning the Green Mark Design Award for it felt surreal, like proof that I didn't need anyone else's validation. Around the same time, Ethan's company began expanding internationally. Watching him succeed was inspiring. He was constantly on the move, setting up offices in Berlin and Tokyo, yet he always made time for us. Whether it was a quiet dinner at home or a surprise weekend trip, he reminded me every day that I wasn't alone. Despite all this, Cassandra wasn't done trying to ruin things. Her next target was Ethan's reputation. One afternoon, Ethan got a call from one of his business partners, Mark. I was in the other room, but I could hear the tension in his voice. When he hung up, he came into the kitchen, his jaw tight. What happened? I asked. Mark just asked me about a rumor, he said, his voice steady but cold. Apparently, someone told him I'd been sued for fraud years ago. My stomach sank. Cassandra? Ethan nodded. Who else? The idea that she would stoop so low, going after Ethan's career, filled me with rage. This wasn't just petty family drama anymore. This was defamation, and it was threatening the life we'd worked so hard to build. We're not letting her get away with this, Ethan said, his tone resolute. He called his lawyer, Andrea, a no-nonsense woman who had handled his business contracts for years. When Ethan explained what was happening, she didn't hesitate. We'll draft a cease and desist letter immediately, Andrea said. If she doesn't stop, we'll escalate to a defamation lawsuit. The letter was sent within days. I didn't see it, but Ethan assured me it was firm and left no room for interpretation. It outlined Cassandra's false claims and warned her that further action would result in legal consequences. I braced myself for the fallout, and it came quickly. The day after she received the letter, Cassandra called my mom in tears, accusing Ethan of bullying her and trying to destroy her life. Naturally, my mom called me, her voice dripping with guilt-tripping concern. Laura, what is going on? She asked. Cassandra says Ethan's threatening her with a lawsuit. Isn't that a little extreme? No, Mom, I said, struggling to keep my voice calm. What's extreme is Cassandra spreading lies about him. She's the one ruining people's lives, not us. But she's your sister, Mom said, as though that justified everything Cassandra had done. Don't you care about what happens to her? No, Mom, I said firmly. I care about what happens to me and Ethan. And I'm not going to let her drag us down just because you refuse to hold her accountable. Mom didn't say much after that, but I knew where her loyalty lay. The legal letter worked. Cassandra stopped spreading lies about Ethan, and for the first time in months, we had some peace. But her life was starting to unravel. Jason, her husband, had been laid off, and without his income, Their extravagant lifestyle quickly caught up with them. Cassandra refused to downsize, insisting they could wait it out, but the debts piled up. Eventually, Jason filed for divorce. Word got around that Cassandra had burned too many bridges. Even her closest friends began cutting ties, fed up with her manipulation and drama. I heard all of this secondhand from family members who still talked to her. Part of me felt vindicated, but mostly, I just felt tired. When Cassandra lost her house and had to move back in with my parents, my mom called to tell me. "She's going through a hard time, Laura," Mom said. "We're just trying to help her get back on her feet." "Of course you are," I said, unable to hide the bitterness in my voice. "She's always been your priority." "That's not fair," Mom protested. "She's your sister. Don't you care about what happens to her?" "I care about what happens to me," I said, "and I'm not going to let her drag us down again." Over time, Cassandra faded from my life. She was still living with my parents, struggling to rebuild her world, but I didn't involve myself. I didn't need an apology or an explanation from her anymore. I'd spent too long letting her control my happiness, and I wasn't going to let that continue. Ethan and I focused on our future. We got married in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by the people who truly supported us. For the first time, I felt like my life was truly mine, not defined by Cassandra, my parents, or their expectations, but by the love and joy I'd built with Ethan. When I looked back on everything, I realized something important. Forgiveness isn't about excusing someone's behavior or pretending the pain never happened. It's about choosing to let go of the weight of that pain and moving forward in a way that protects your peace. And that's exactly what I did.